This is my winter project. I decided to build a modified teardrop camper trailer. My son had an unused boat trailer and I needed a winter project. This is the final product. I thought it'd be fun to put a video together. Here's an abbreviated description of how I put it together. I am by nature a minimalist. I like things to be simple, easy to build, easy to keep, easy to upkeep, and therefore usually less expensive also. It's a basic mantra, and that's how I built this unit. The trailer frame was 4 feet outside to outside on the rails and 8 feet long. The 8 feet was correct, but I was looking at it and decided that 4 feet was definitely going to be too narrow inside for 2 people to sleep comfortably. I decided to go with a 5 foot wide frame, 8 foot long, and took the 4 foot trailer frame that I had, simply split it down the middle, went to my local sheet metal shop and got some channels that would make it so I could extend the width. And you can see that here on the first picture. You can also see that I got rid of the tilting mechanism and brought the tongue up to be even with the top so the whole unit was flat. Here you can see the frame with the channels added to give me the extra width. Fit in, held them together, squared it all up, and welded it up. Here you can see a small detail. The channels would fit inside the existing ones, and that would keep it square and flat, and it also helped it keep it from twisting. Here you can see the gap from the split that from the frame to go to the tongue, and so I had some small channels that I put in there. Filled that space and tied them together, welded them also. I also wanted to put a tongue box on this to hold the battery and other things too, and so I needed to extend some support to the front up to the tongue, and this is how I did it. I had 2 more channels built for me at the sheet metal shop, but this time they were actually larger than, just fit over the existing frame, and I was able to lay it over that at the radius, take it forward to the tongue, and then weld the 2 together. It gave me sort of a nice unit, and it gave a lot more strength to the tongue left to right. And here's a quick shot of the whole frame when it was done and painted. Since the trailer is 1 foot wider, I had to make the axle 1 foot wider also. At this point, I have some words of wisdom. I put these on with a couple of very light angles. I think they were 12 gauge stainless, and I thought that would be fine. After I got the unit together, the weight of the unit was able to bend it in the middle where I didn't think it would. I ended up taking it apart, and I put it together with some real heavy-duty angle iron. I think it was 1/4 by 1 or 1.5, and I put 4 rows of it on there and welded it all up. Now there's no problem with it. Make this part stronger. Here's how the base was assembled. Having it 5 foot wide complicates things drastically. 4 by 8 sheets of plywood now don't cover the whole thing, and so there has to be compensated for, and you need to put the strength in wherever there's a joint. What I did was I built the framework with 2 sets of supports crosswise. It is a sheet of 1/2 inch plywood on the bottom, 2 by 4s laid on their flat side, and the insulation in between all the supports. Because of the width of the unit, I had to get supports for both of the joints. I staggered the joint. The joint for the 1 foot extra is on one side on the bottom and the opposite on the top, and it gives us some strength that way. It also adds a little weight because there's more 2 by 4s and 2 by 6s in there than there was before. I put the cross supports, one in the center of the sleeping area to spread the weight, and the second is at the bulkhead that divides the footwell from the kitchen area. Here's a picture of the deck sitting on the frame. I was just making sure at this point that everything fit the way I wanted it to, and also that I could get the tongue box on in the right place. Just checking that the tongue box is going to fit the way I wanted it to. Came out really nice. I'm really happy. Here's the bed on the frame, and I have the carriage underneath it now, just to make sure everything fit together well. I used carriage bolts down through the bed and then through the frame, and then bolted it on. I have 6 carriage bolts holding it. Seemed good and secure. I took a cue from the camper and mobile home people and I put the linoleum across the whole base of the bed, fastened it all down, and then I was able to put staples along the edge where it would be covered by the walls. It also holds the edges down so they don't come up later on, and it gives me a good base to work from. Starting on the walls now, I used a 4x8 sheet of plywood. I modified the teardrop type simply because I wanted to get more use of the space. The angle is nice and it's pretty and everything, and of course it's definitely more to the old style teardrops design. I just liked the symmetry of the two ends being the same. It's an 18-inch radius front and back. I used 3/4 inch plywood for the sides. There is no insulation in the sidewalls. This is going to be a good weather camper. It's not made for cold weather like that. The floor is insulated so the bed won't get cold, but this is not made for the winters. The piece of cardboard sitting on there is the size of the door I was going to make, and so I'm basically just fitting it and seeing where I wanted to put it in there. And here's the side view. I've got the door cut in it now, and you can also see the notches for where the ribs are going to go crosswise for the roof and ceiling. I looked into buying doors, the ones that you assemble and put right into the opening, but the prices just were awful high, and I was going to put one on each side. I have 2 doors in the unit, so it was going to be rather pricey. I decided to build my own, and this is what I came up with. It seemed to work pretty well. I faced the interior with 1/4 inch Luan underlayment. It's actually very inexpensive, and if you put polyurethane on it, it looks rather attractive. I didn't want to get too dark inside anyway because they're in an enclosed space, so it worked out pretty well. You can see it here. I've got it fit and up against the unit and clamped down, and I think I've already got it glued at this point. I did use the blanks from the plywood and the interior plywood for the doors themselves also, so that wasn't wasted. Here's the interior after the polyurethane is put on. It's rather inexpensive, but it looks pretty nice. If you notice at the bottom of this panel, the Luan inside is held up a 1/2 inch from the outside edge of the 3/4 inch plywood. The reason for that is the way it will lay over the base when I get done. I'll show you a detail in a moment so you'll see what I'm talking about. I actually bought a pocket hole jig and screws for this application. I wanted to get some downforce to hold the walls down onto the deck, and this gave me the ability to do that. So here it shows those just the pocket holes. This shows how the top deck was held back on the length of the trailer where the walls are going to set. The 1/4 inch Luan will be up on top of the linoleum. This shows the notch on the wall that will sit on that lip. The wall was then screwed through the pocket holes downward and horizontally into the base plate. The next 3 slides just show us standing up the walls. I covered the floor with cardboard and tape to protect it during its construction. I used 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch cross braces. It gave me the thickness I needed for a little insulation and support, and also gave me a good strength crosswise and torsionally for the box itself. I also wanted to give you a detail on how I fastened the cross braces to the wall by going half distance down in both directions. I was able to both vertically and horizontally screw it together. It gave it a real good stiffness. Here's a couple of shots of the framework going in. The cross braces go up the front and across the top, and the last one is back where the hatch is attached. Here's a couple of shots of the fillers between the ribs. They serve 2 purposes. They became a nailer for the interior plywood and also stiffened the frame drastically. Worked out really well. I just used 1x lumber in here. It gave me a good nailer, and it was relatively inexpensive. This is a view of the top framing looking toward the back. I just put this here to show you the framing for the vent that will come later. Here I'm starting on the interior top, ceiling, and front wall. I used the Luan once again, and in this case, of course, you want to pre-finish it ahead of time on the flat. Much easier than doing it afterwards, and I did that way. I was able to do the bend, the internal radius, by scarfing out a lot of channels on the plywood where it was bent. It takes some doing, and you got to be a little careful. If you don't put enough relief in it, it might have broken. I got it through, but it was not an enjoyable thing. The interior ceiling was just a continuation. Once again, I pre-finished it so that wouldn't have to be done later. This is what the interior front radius and ceiling and sidewall looked like when they were done. At this point, I started building the bulkhead that separates the sleeping area from the kitchen area. The lower vertical piece of plywood there that you see will actually end up as the end of the footwell from the sleeping area. This shows the countertop being assembled on top of the bulkhead you saw in the last slide. The notch on the right-hand side is going to be a hinged counter where the ice chest is going to be stored, and that way it'll have access to the ice chest but still have the counter space above it. This just shows some extra support that was put in to support the countertop. Here you can see that I've got the final piece of the bulkhead. It goes from the top of the countertop up to the ceiling, and it does the final close off between the kitchen and the sleeping area. I've got that in there, and I've got the finished piece of glue-on inside of that also to get that done. I had enough of the vinyl flooring left over to use it for the countertop, so I did. I am frugal. Those 2x6s I think are just holding down the edges while the glue dries. Here's how the finished countertop looked. I just finished it off with some 3/4 by 3/4 inch aluminum trim angle, and I think it looks pretty good. Following my keep it simple theme, there will just be 2 shelves above the countertop. I sized both of these so that these gray parts bins could be used to organize if that was required. I shortened the top shelf in order to leave a space on the left-hand upper shelf to hold a water jug with a spigot. I also faced these shelves with a small lip to prevent things from falling off. This also shows the hinged lid for the ice chest is now in place. Moving back into the sleeping area, we're looking at the back of the upper bulkhead from the kitchen area, and in keeping with my keep it simple thing, I decided on 2 shelves deep enough that we could put clothing, things like that into it, and this is the beginning of it. This is where the shelves themselves are going in. I didn't want to do cabinet doors, so I devised a facing that would keep the material inside on both the shelves. Here's the finished product. You can also see how your footwell below would be where your feet would be when you were sleeping. The next few slides just show the routing of the wiring. All of the lights and the USB chargers are powered directly from the 12-volt battery. That's the wiring that you see here running inside the framework of the trailer. The last shot will be where the wires are all coming down into where the final connection point will be. This is the box I made for the final connections. It is on the countertop on the right hand side behind the ice bin lid. I bought this fuse box online, probably from Amazon, and it greatly simplified the wiring of the 12-volt side of this system. It has the capacity for 6 circuits, but I only use 3. At this point I'm using the 3 empty ones as places to store extra fuses. The octagon box on the bottom left hand side is where my 120 volt power will be coming in. There are 3 120 volt duplex outlets built onto the trailer. One will be in the sleeping area, one will be on the right side wall, and the other will be in the kitchen. The third one in the kitchen is actually on the face of this box, and I'll show you that in a moment. The second one, it goes through the wall. You can see that on the right side of this box where the wiring goes in, and the third one runs into the sleeping area. You can see the 120 volt feed line coming into the octagon box. That in turn feeds the 3 outlets, It also feeds a small battery charger that's mounted under the shelf to keep the battery charged while the unit is plugged in. And here's the battery charger. It's mounted under the same shelf that we've been looking at, and it is wired directly to the battery and is always running whenever the cord electrical power is plugged into the 120 volts. This is the front of the electrical box we were looking at a while ago. It is the duplex outlet that's in the kitchen, and also I've got the USB charger port above it. That's what the two wires in the hole are going to be for. This unit is not screwed on or fastened on. What I did is I put it on with Velcro, and that allows us to peel it off to get back in to the fuse box. This is just a narrow shelf that is above the headboard of the sleeping area. It's only about 3 inches wide, and it actually has this on both ends. Don't know why I didn't take a picture of the complete unit, but it's just a small shelf for small parts. On each end there's a USB outlet and a small reading lamp for each person. On the left end of the storage shelves I showed you earlier, I put in a 120 volt outlet and also a USB outlet. There's also a 2-bulb light on the ceiling right behind the overhead vent. It's hard to see in this picture, but there is a nice little lamp up there that is for the back hatch for the kitchen. I filled the spaces between the cross braces with 1.5 inch foam insulation. It makes the interior more comfortable and probably helps with sound deadening also. The exterior front and top are 1/4 inch plywood. I used the same method of scarfing in order to bend the radius of the top corner. And here's the top view where you can see the vent opening. Here's a quick overview of how I built the doors. As I said before, I used the blanks from the sidewalls 3/4 inch plywood that I cut the door opening for. The same goes for the interior plywood. It was already pre-finished. To seal the door, I used 2 inch by 1/4 inch thick aluminum flat plate. What I did was put it 1 inch overhanging the door and 1 inch overhanging the outside, and then I used a seal against the door and the wall to seal it up. In these few slides you can see how I fit and fastened the trim to the door itself. Here's what the trim looks like finished on all 3 sides. I bought the windows online, probably Amazon. They seem to be a very nice unit. They fit the right size, and they were self-contained. You get a screen and an opening window, and all seals and joints come together in one package. I was very happy with the quality, fit, and finish. And here's what they look like mounted in place. And here's the finished door from the inside. The locking handles I bought for use in the doors were intended for exterior use only, so I devised a simple interior latch system. It's simply an extended latch with a knob. To lock the door from the inside, all you have to do is take this looped cable and put it over the knob. I decided to use fiberglass reinforced plastic for the exterior of the trailer. It's readily available at your home improvement store. It comes in 4x8 sheets. Very, very workable, and all you have to do is glue it down. I spread the vinyl flooring adhesive with a notched trowel. For the exterior corners, I went with a standard RV angle. It has a flat space for the screws to hold it down. The angle goes over the edge, and then you cover the screws with a plastic insert. This did present a problem though. Being an angle, there was no way that I could bend it around the radius. My solution was that I took the outside angle flange and trimmed it down at the area of the radius. I then cut a piece of flat aluminum, painted it black, and cut it to fit the radius so that it would appear that the angle came around the edge. And the finished product looks pretty good. Here's the framework for the back hatch. I didn't build the hatch all the way to the base because I wanted to build in some stiffness to the sidewalls. I did that by adding a 6-inch plywood stiffener at the bottom. I built a template out of 1/4-inch plywood of the match on the inside of the rear wall at the radius down to the plate. I then cut 8 of these pieces out of the 3/4-inch plywood. I used 1.5-inch square cross braces once again, except for the bottom, and at that point I used a 2x4 once again on the flat. By inlaying the cross supports and fitting the internal pieces together, it made for a very stiff frame. Here's what the frame for the hatch looked like when it was finished. Here it is set in place. This is how the Hurricane hinge fits. Screws down to the framework on the trailer, and also the frame of the hatch. I decided to use masonite for the back hatch cover. It gave me a white interior, and all I had to do was polyurethane the frame ahead of time, and the inside was finished. It was flexible enough to go around the radius, and also gave me a very good base for the glue for the outside finish. I then glued on the exterior plastic. I then trimmed the bottom and 2 sides with 2-inch by 1/4-inch thick aluminum trim. I extruded them on with a 1-inch overhang. I used a 1-inch rubber seal on the ends of the sidewall panel. A 1-inch overhang on the trim is what seals the rear hatch. I was very happy with the finished product. Here's the hatch in the raised position. To latch the hatch down, I bought 2 of these adjustable clamps. They call them a toggle clamp. Bought them online at Amazon. It seemed a simple solution for holding down the hatch. It also is hard to see, but there is provisions for a padlock in each one. This is what they look like in place. Here's a couple of slides showing how the tongue jack fits on the tongue. And here's the tongue box sitting on the tongue and getting ready to be fastened down. The tongue box was an inexpensive plastic unit, and I wanted a little bit stronger base because of the 12-volt battery was going to go in there, and also jacks and other things that were necessary to travel with. So I built a plywood base to stiffen the bottom of the box. Picked up some fenders on Amazon. They're plastic and pretty proportional to the size of the wheels and tires. It looks pretty nice. Also picked up some aluminum flat trim that used for the joints of the plastic, support in the front of the edge, anywhere I thought the wind might be hard on it, and along the bottom edges of the left and right side. This is the same stuff that has the plastic overlay over the screw heads. This is a few shots of the finished kitchen, the area where the ice chest will go, and shelving detail. I added these swing-out jacks to the frame on either corner of the back to give it some support when it's parked in place. The total weight when finished was a little bit over 1,000 pounds. So there you have it, my modified teardrop winter project. If you have any questions, just let me know.